Welcome, my friends, to our series on Mercury in the 12 houses of the horoscope. I'm just so glad that you've joined me for this series. This information is coming to you from my Royal Stars Academy course in astrology, and you can learn astrology there with me at any time you like, or if you prefer, you can do one of my short courses at the Learn Astrology page of my website. And now, without any further ado, let's look straight at Mercury. We know that Mercury is the planet considered to be closest to the sun. But did you know that in the 1800s, it was believed that there was another planet, Vulcan, that existed between Mercury and the sun? However, it was considered too close to the sun to be observable in the sun's glare. In fact, in esoteric astrology, the hypothetical Vulcan is still included in astrological analysis, and it's an absolutely fascinating point in the sky. So my point being here is that there are some people who consider that Mercury is not the closest planet to the sun. But in this series, we'll be looking at current astronomical concepts. And that means Mercury is the messenger of the gods, considered to be the closest to the sun, our main luminary in the sky. Let's look at the astronomy of Mercury. Mercury is the smallest planet in the solar system. As we've just established, it's also the closest planet to the sun. But even though it is near to the sun, it is not the hottest planet. Would you believe that because Mercury has no atmosphere at all, it has the most variable temperatures of any planet because it cannot retain any heat from the sun? You know, nighttime temperatures on Mercury can get as cold as minus 173 degrees Celsius, or that's minus 280 degrees Fahrenheit. While in the daytime, Mercury is hotter than your oven. It gets to a stinking 427 degrees Celsius. That's 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Amazing. What a variance. Now, Mercury also takes 87 Earth days to orbit the sun. Earth only takes 365. So it's a very fast little planet. It spins around the sun really, really quickly. Mercury is made of rocks covered in crater holes, just like the moon is. And this tells us that it's been hit many times in the past by comets and meteors. They slammed into little Mercury very hard, as once again, Mercury has no atmosphere to buffer them or slow the comets down. So the impact was very visible, or is very visible, on Mercury's surface. Billions of years ago, Mercury was also volcanically active, and this has also made its splotchy surface full of volcanoes and vents and craters as well. Let's look at the mythology of Mercury. You know, people have known that Mercury as a body in the sky has existed since as long ago as 1400 years BC. You know, in ancient Babylon, they called Mercury Nabu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Nabu. And Nabu was the god in charge of writing, thinking, and wisdom. He would write down on a tablet the fated destiny of each person. Nabu wore a cap with horns and rode on a winged dragon named Sirush. Now, it was the Romans who worshipped the god that was named Mercury, and he was the god connected to business and making money, communicating and giving messages. He was also associated with traveling and was a guide for souls going to the underworld. There's a lot of mythology about Mercury knowing what's going on in the underworld because he was the god that traversed the pathway to the underworld. He had a special temple built for him in 495 BC and a celebration on the 15th of May called Mercurialia. In ancient Greece, Mercury was known as Hermes, the youngest of all the Greek gods. Hermes liked to trick people. He was a bit of a prankster and a fun lover, a lot like Loki in the Norse mythology. He also wore winged shoes and a winged hat. He had a rooster for a pet and was referred to as the messenger of the gods. The Egyptians also worshipped a god who was named Thoth, and just like Mercury and Hermes, he was the god of wisdom and writing and science and magic and art. He was also the god of judgment and the dead. Thoth had the body of a human with the head of an ibis bird. He was the secretary and counselor to the Egyptian sun god Ra, a record keeper this time, not just a messenger of the gods. Now, what about the astrology of Mercury? In astrology, Mercury tells us about how we learn, what we tend to think about, how we will tend to speak and communicate. Mercury also represents business and trade, brothers and sisters, and is also the planet of being young and playful. Where Mercury sits in our astrology chart, the map of the sky at the moment we were born, will tell us so much about how we're going to be playful, how we will think, how we will speak, and how we're going to learn best in life. Now, your Mercury might say that you will learn best through being around other people. Or maybe your Mercury position might say that you will learn best through being very quiet and reading a lot. Or maybe by experimenting and doing things that are very out of the ordinary. There are so many ways we can learn, and Mercury shows us how we can best do that. In astrology, Mercury is also a very talented planet. It tells us about our skills and our abilities. If Mercury is in Virgo, for example, it might tell us that we might find that we're very good at cooking. If Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, we might have an amazing imagination and create fascinating stories. Perhaps our Mercury is in the sign of Gemini, and that might make us a very funny person indeed. Wherever Mercury sits can also show us what our brothers and our sisters might be like. For example, if Mercury is in the zodiac sign of Aries, our siblings might be very competitive and like to play games. Or in the sign of Aquarius, our brothers and sisters might be very quirky and unusual and super smart. Mercury is a planet that is in charge of two star signs known as Gemini and Virgo. These two signs are all about being very clever and practical with your hands or practical with your mind or both. Mercury in astrology is also the playful jester, a jokester. He is clever and bright. He is a young person, a youthful energy, and all of us have a little bit of Mercury in our heart somewhere. Everyone is different in the way they learn, think, talk, and play. And Mercury teaches us to love the different ways people think and communicate, and to love our own unique way of thinking and talking and communicating as well. In what ways are you talented? How do you learn best? What things do you think about the most? This is all reflective of your Mercury placement. Your Mercury placement gives the reason for the answers you just gave to those questions I asked you, and so much more. And now, without any further ado, we're going to look at what Mercury brings to us or gives to our lives through his placement in each of the houses of the horoscope. So join with me now. We're going to dive into a little piece from the Royal Stars Academy that describes Mercury in all the different houses. When Mercury is in the first house, well, this is great directional strength in the Vedic system for Mercury. It's one of the best houses for Mercury to be in. Fantastic. It means that you will be witty as a person and a very skillful person in general. Likely to be, if you're not doing it professionally, you'll still have talents as a comedian, as a speaker, as a writer. You'll be very media savvy, good with your hands, and good at technical things. My son has this, one of my sons, and he, as I've already alluded to in the first Mercury video, he is the comedian of our family. He has us in stitches on many occasions. Very, very, very witty. Now, your appearance might be influenced by Mercury too, and it might make you more youthful. It might give you the personality of a Peter Pan type person as well. Again, this is my son. Let me contrast to you my two sons. One son, this son, has Mercury in the first house,
And my other son, who's a year younger, has Saturn in the first house. Well, my Saturn in the first house son has grown a beard at age 16, full beard, and very hipster. And my Mercury in the first house son is so jealous. He can't grow a beard. For him, who is 17, not possible, because he has this youthful look. And for him, the ability to grow a beard is a long way down the track for him. So we get the influence of the planet in the first house gives us a certain look pertaining to what that planet rules. In Saturn, it's to look more aged than you actually are. With Mercury, it's to look youthful, and my son with the Mercury in the first house will maintain his youth in the long term because of Mercury being here, which I'm sure that he'll be very grateful for as time goes on. A person with Mercury in the first house will enjoy being around youthful cultures. They'll be more youthful in outlook, and they'll appreciate young and progressive things because Mercury is a youthful energy. Usually a very logical person, not so much emotional. Very much the case. Good with numbers and a good dexterity with hands. They're usually a strategist. They're very tactical and also very social. They like to be amongst people. They tend to also be quite brilliant in seeing connections between things, seeing the synchronicities out there, which can also be quite fascinating. Now, Mercury, if it happens to be the ruler of, for example, the fifth house, so it's the fifth house lord sitting in the first house, it might indicate that you might be a writer or a speaker for children's topics. If Mercury rules the seventh house but sits in the first house, it might indicate that you might write or speak about relationships. If Mercury happens to rule the 12th house, it would indicate that you might write or speak about spiritual things, meditation, things like that. So you can see that you may be a writer or a speaker with Mercury in the first house, and it will pertain to the sign or the house rather, that Mercury is the ruler of. Mercury in the first house is very noted for their persuasive skills, good debaters, fast responses, lots of agility with their mind and their words. But they also have an easy personality, very, very likable personality. They will gesture with their hands a lot when they communicate. And, the big, maybe like the Italian kind of, mwah, kind of events with their hands, or movements rather with their hands. Mark Twain had this position, and he was renowned for his brilliant communication and insights. So there's an example of somebody with Mercury in the first house. But the path in life is seen through the first house, and it's about short trips, Mercury, influences from cousins and siblings. So in the case of the example of my son, he is very influenced by the relationships he's got with his two siblings. He is very influenced by the teachers that he's had. His path in life may even involve at some point for him sharing information and teaching others. For him, he is becoming, as he gets older, a very keen learner. He hasn't fitted in very well, I must say, based on the sign that Mercury is in. He hasn't fitted in very well with conventional learning processes. But as he gets older and is able to navigate those things better, he is becoming a passionate learner, very passionate learner. So learning can be a big part of your path in life with Mercury in the first house. Often there's a diverse set of interests with Mercury in the first house. You can be a jack of all trades. You might be studying psychology at the same time as doing a building apprenticeship, which is what my son was doing. So very diverse abilities and interests. Also very handy people. They're useful to have around. They actually like to help. They like to help, and they like to be of use. Mercury obviously governs Virgo, so useful people. They're terrific merchants as well, because Mercury rules business and trade and stock markets. My son's been, I just keep using him as an example, but he's so Mercury in the first house, it's not funny. He's been exploring the stock markets and how to get involved in stock market trading and that sort of thing. They can have iconic voices, not so much in the way they're speaking, but the voice of a movement, the voice of a subject. They can be that iconic person that is the symbolism of some some movement, some subject, some representation in the world.